Hello and welcome back to Everything's Fine Probably, your weekly antidote to bad news. I'm Jim, your host, and if you were with us last week, you'll remember we went full Animal Kingdom with the Positive Animal Special. We had sheep on a train, elks on an overpass, and bats on a bridge. And we thought it might be hard to top that. So this week, we're going for something completely different. We're swapping whiskers for passports and diving into a topic that's been doing laps around the news and social media like a squirrel on too much caffeine. Immigration. It's the subject guaranteed to turn keyboard warriors into political experts overnight and your local pub into an impromptu Brexit-style debate. But before we all start picturing migrants sneaking into our houses to nick our cereal, let's pause. Because, as usual, the headlines might be a bit dramatic. We seem to be faced with a constant barrage of stories like local community protests hotel housing asylum seekers and UK plans to tighten immigration rules, followed by the usual flood of memes showing the UK as a fortress made out of tea bags and soggy biscuits. And let's not forget the bizarre conspiracy theories doing the rounds, like immigrants are single-handedly responsible for NHS waiting times, or migrants caused the great biscuit shortage of 2025. Well, fact check those later. Spoiler, biscuit shortage? That was me. So for anyone worried, scared, or just plain confused by all the noise, this episode is for you. We'll unpack the facts, bust some myths, and hopefully remind you that the UK is not currently under siege by anyone. So buckle up and let's dive into the wonderful, weird, and sometimes downright baffling world of immigration in the UK. I'm joined on the couch this week by Stu. How are you?
Hello, how are you?
I'm good, man. You?
What's this about a biscuit shortage?
Yeah, I know. It's shocking, isn't it?
I'm worried.
Shocking.
I'm worried.
All we've got left in the house is a few rich teas.
Oh dear.
Shocking.
That bad, is it?
Shocking.
No bourbons.
No bourbons?
No custard creams.
No.
Chocolate digestive.
Nope.
Those pink wafers.
No.
Garibaldis. Oat crunchies.
No.
So none of the biscuits.
None of the biscuits. Terrible. So let's get started. Let's start with the numbers. What's really going on here? Net immigration to the UK is way higher than what we saw in the 2010s. The Office for National Statistics tells us that in 2024, net migration was still in the hundreds of thousands. Now, a lot of the increase over recent years has been driven by non-EU arrivals, mostly people coming here on work and study visas. So the UK is basically a magnet for students chasing degrees and workers chasing paychecks. Meanwhile, EU migration, that's actually fallen. So yeah, Brexit's doing its thing.
So I can just jump in there.
Yeah.
I'll just put some stats around that. So
Thanks, Stu.
between 2005 to 2019, pre-Brexit and pre-pandemic trends, net migration in the UK during this period was generally positive, fluctuating between 200 and 350,000. Following the 2016 EU referendum, there was a shift, as you say, with a decrease in EU net migration and an increase in non-EU net migration, though the figure pretty much remained within this range. The pandemic and its aftermath, so during COVID-19, this caused significant disruption to the patterns in migration. In 2020, net migration dropped substantially due to travel restrictions. However, this was followed by a sharp and unprecedented increase in 21 and 22, driven by a combination of factors, as you say, including new visa routes for non-EU citizens, especially for work and study, because
huge.
After Brexit, if we're going to stop one group of people coming into work, we're going to still need the workers. So we'll have to bring them in from another route. So obviously there was humanitarian schemes also during this period from Ukraine and Hong Kong as well, plus the post-pandemic rebound in global migration. So the last 4 to 5 years, there's been a lot of factors on top of why migration has fluctuated. And as you say, it has actually decreased now, hasn't it? I think we've hit that peak.
Yeah, I'll come on to the actual numbers in a moment. I'd like to deal with the drama of the small boats that we're hearing so much about at the moment crossing the channel. So, for sure, those numbers have risen sharply since 2018. Around 37,000 detected in 2024 alone, and that's a lot of small boats. If the boats were any smaller, they'd be kayaks. But, and it is a Kardashian-sized but, asylum grants actually make up a smaller share of total migration compared to the work and study route. So while small boats and asylum seekers get on the headlines on all the political fireworks, most of the new arrivals come through official legal challenge. Now, before you shout, but Jim, the numbers are skyrocketing, let me drop a reality bomb. Different official data sets measure different things. The ONS uses surveys and they estimate who stays long term, while the Home Office counts visas issued, asylum claims, and detections. So it's not like comparing apples and oranges, or maybe apples with kiwi fruit. You know, it's close enough, but it's not the same. So whenever you hear a headline screaming a huge migration number, the first question you need to ask is, what data set are you quoting? Because if they don't say, you're probably getting a number with more spin than a politician at a dance party.
Mm.
Let's clear up the big tabloid panic point, shall we? Net migration is skyrocketing, 1 million arrivals. Okay, the ONS provisional estimate for 2024 is more like 430,000 net migration. That's a big number, but it's half of what some tabloids claim. So the only thing actually skyrocketing is their creativity with numbers. On the upside, net migration did nearly half from the peak of around 860,000 in 2023, so we're seeing a drop off. Still, though, way above the 2010s average. And the small boats, okay, sure, 37,000 detected crossings in 2024. Sounds like a lot, because it is. But let's not forget that's a fraction of overall migration. And the numbers do fluctuate.
So what, and those numbers are included in the net migration as well.
Yeah,
Because I
absolutely.
checked that. So that's 10%.
Yeah, it's tiny.
So 10% of net migration is
And small boats.
applications.
Yeah.
And as we're seeing as well now, over half are accepted and half are rejected.
Yeah.
So I think one of the problems people are concerned or upset about is when an asylum application is rejected, there's currently nothing in this country to track then what happens to those people. Obviously, if you've had your asylum application rejected, you can't then obviously access any of the public purse. So you can't get any benefits, etc., etc. So the concern is, are some of the people staying here and then going into the black market, being paid cash, etc., etc. So currently there is no scheme to track where these people go. And I think that's one of the fears that certainly the media do kind of like stir up the public and people's fear, don't they?
And let's be perfectly honest, we can only talk about recorded migration here. That's what all the official numbers are. So there will be people, I'm sure, who will look at this and go, well, yeah, but what about all the people who are coming in that you don't know about? Quite right, but we don't know about them.
Okay.
And therefore, to talk about something that you don't know about,
Yes.
well, without data, how can you possibly say? I mean, if we sum it up, immigration is higher than a decade ago, mostly because of work and study visas. Asylum seekers and small boats are headline grabbers, but they're not the main drivers of migration. And the stats, I mean, they're complicated. It's like trying to solve a Rubik's Cube blindfolded.
And I think, to be clear as well, net migration is the difference between the number of people immigrating to the UK and the number of people emigrating from it. Okay, so we need to consider that. We need to consider the asylum piece is 10%. And obviously we've had Brexit, we've had the pandemic.
Well, you've mentioned the B word, so can I bring it in really? Because we do need to talk about Brexit.
We do.
Because you can't mention UK immigration without it popping up like an unwanted party guest. So, was Brexit necessary to reduce immigration? The short answer is no, not really. So here's the story. Brexit did cut EU immigration. In fact, net EU migration turned negative in 2024, which I think you mentioned, Stu,
Yes.
meaning more EU nationals left than arrived. So again, the Office for National Statistics says it was around minus 96,000. Freedom of movement, yeah, that got the boot. So if you voted leave hoping immigration would plummet, that you got half the picture. Because while EU migration dropped, non-EU migration shot up, especially work and study visas. So total net migration stayed sky high at around 430,000 in 2024. It's like swapping one flavour for another. Less EU pasta, more non-EU curry. Same spice level, different taste. Here's a kick in the crotch for the headline writers. The UK could have controlled migration with policy tools without leaving the EU. Visa caps, employer sponsorships, tighter border checks. These are things other EU countries manage while keeping freedom of movement. So Brexit really wasn't the only ticket out of the migration theme park. Basically, Brexit was like swapping your old phone for a new one, different model, same number of annoying notifications. So, Brexit is not just about numbers, but it has had some real impacts. Because sectors like farming, hospitals, hospitality, and construction, they're all feeling the pinch with fewer EU workers. Try running a kitchen with half your chefs gone. Non-EU workers help fill some gaps, but it's often slower and it's more expensive. Economically, Brexit introduced trade frictions and uncertainties that have slowed growth compared to what was expected. Universities lost some EU students too, since fee status and research funds changed. But non-EU student numbers have helped make up some ground. And with more people here, public services feel the strain. Though how much is Brexit versus funding choices? That's a whole other kettle of fish. Politically and socially, Brexit definitely cranked up the heat on migration debates. It polarised opinions and it fueled misinformation. So to wrap up, Brexit did reduce EU immigration, but total net migration stayed high thanks to non-EU arrivals. So it shifted the migration picture, it didn't slash it. The result has been labour shortages, some economic hiccups, some political drama, and more reasons for the media to get worked up. And the million-dollar question, was Brexit necessary to reduce migration? No. Targeted controls and policy tweaks could have done the trick without the whole political earthquake.
I think one of the main concerns, the cost of the asylum system in the UK, and this has been rising significantly in recent years. So it is important to know that is a concern of people, but it's not just direct support for asylum seekers, but it's also broad Home Office spending on asylum and migration related activities. According to recent government independent reports, in the financial year 23-24, the cost of operating the asylum system rose to £5.4 billion. This is a record high and a sharp increase. So a major driver of this cost is the use of hotel accommodation for asylum seekers, which actually isn't ideal, is it? Because it's not a very humane way of people waiting for their applications to be processed. Also, it causes unrest in the local communities. And we have seen over this weekend, haven't we, some demos, localised demos around locals being whipped up, go to these hotels, which, makes that quite uncomfortable, doesn't it, for everyone, really?
Yeah, I'd like to talk more about the hotels. Before I do, I think one of the things that prompts this whole thing of protest is this idea that, well, you hear it, that classic immigrants commit loads of crime. Look at the scary percentages. Makes you want to hide under your duvet with a cup of tea and a crossbow, doesn't it? Last week, Robert Jenrick, the former community secretary, wannabe Tory leader, and apparently the successor to the magician Dynamo because he made some facts disappear. Robert Jenrick claimed that a whopping 40% of sexual crimes in London were committed by foreign nationals. And since foreign nationals only make up about 25% of London's population, sounds like a horror story cooked up by the Ministry of Misinformation, doesn't it?
It's a worry.
But, well, hold your pitchforks, Stu. The claim was debunked pretty quickly by multiple fact checkers. It turns out the number he quoted was based on charges, not convictions, and it ignored the fact that nationality data in police records is often incomplete or, well, it's just plain dodgy. The figures come from the outdated Police National Computer, known for nationality recording errors, ambiguities, and frequent unknown entries. It's considered not reliable for nationality, in official circles. Jemrick cited a bunch called the Centre for Migration Control.
Is that a think tank?
They are a little known anti-migration think tank. Absolutely. Yeah,
Hudson Street.
CMC's methodology, it's opaque. It's a single director group with political aims. It's got about as much neutrality as a referee who's actually the goalkeeper's cousin. It's not exactly a neutral data provider. The Migration Observatory at Oxford, the House of Commons
You almost feel like they've got an agenda.
Well, I wouldn't like to say that for definite, Stu, but you do wonder, don't you?
Yeah, sorry, you said about the Oxford
Yes,
University.
So the Migration Observatory at Oxford, also the House of Commons Library, and even the Met Police themselves warn that raw percentages without context are basically clickbait. And frankly, a terrible way to do public policy. So, in short, the claim was statistically flawed, demographically misleading, based on unreliable data, politically motivated through a partisan source, and callously misrepresentative. And it was condemned by independent fact checkers. So, yes, Robert Jemrick, you got called out. Not a good look, mate. But hey, at least it gave you some nice juicy headlines with some tea-spitting moments.
I think currently in our prison state in this country, we've got 10,000, over 10,000 foreign offenders. That's 12% of the prison population, which, you know, is significant. It's significant, but it's 12%. So number one are the Albanians. They come in with 1,100. 707 for the Irish, they're next. 320 Indian and 307 Pakistani.
But I think the trouble with these sort of stats is they ignore some pretty important stuff like age, gender, whether someone lives in a poverty hotspot. So, for example, younger men commit most sexual offences, and foreign national populations in London skew younger and more male. So, without controlling for variables like that, any comparisons are misleading.
This number doesn't break down what the crimes are either.
I mean, the truth is that once you factor all of that in, the difference between migrants and non-migrants committing crime, it pretty much disappears. Here's a quick fact check for you. The Met Police themselves say the nationality data isn't super reliable, okay? The Migration Observatory at Oxford University backs it up. Headline percentages don't tell the full story. And the House of Commons Library research warns that jumping to conclusions without demographic controls is deeply flawed. So next time someone tells you that X% of crimes are by migrants, just remember, that's more about the charge, about the conviction. It's more about noise and about numbers. One panic that I think we hear a lot is this idea of we get more immigrants, we get more crime. And if you think that, you're not alone, but you're also wrong. Again, let's look at official studies by the Home Office and the ONS. They've looked at it again and again. And guess what? Once you control for stuff like local deprivation, fancy word for poverty and social issues, age, policing differences, the link between immigration and rising crime evaporates faster than a hobnob in a brew. Crime tends to have a lot more to do with economics, drug markets, and local gangs than where someone was born. Migration is a variable. I mean, it's basically waving from the sidelines, not scoring goals. You could blame squirrels for rising crime rates, and it would be about as factually correct as blaming immigrants. Now, if you're thinking, but hang on, my town has more violence and there's definitely more migrants. Yeah, that sounds simple, right? Unfortunately, local crime, it's a really complicated soap opera. You've got poverties, gangs, policing, drugs, demographic shifts, all in a tangled plotline. If we look at academic studies on migration and crime that actually control for age and socioeconomic status, migrants are not the main culprits. So blaming immigrants for spikes in violent crimes like blaming the weather on your phone battery dying. They might happen at the same time. They're about as connected as tea in a canoe.
I think, you know, the small boats as well, you know, we need to get through the woods and understand what we're looking at as well, because we know over half of asylum applications are granted. So these people are in general need. They've run away from like Syria or Ukraine, or they've been persecuted. Even Albania. I know people have this thing about Albanian young men come over here, but there's Albanian young men who are persecuted and are, you know, seeking asylum.
Probably trying to get away from Norman Wisdom films.
Well, for sure. But you know, but government action can make a difference. So in 2022, there was 16,000 applications from Albanians. That made up 16% of all asylum applications. this has now fallen dramatically due to government interaction and also working closely now with Albania. So that's the way to look at it, isn't it? To look at where maybe you've got some sort of various high percentages, understand why that is, and then work with that country of origin
Mm.
to try to, encourage people not to make that. And let's face it, a really dangerous crossing.
Well, yeah, absolutely. But yeah, it does show the value of actually looking at data, understanding what it's telling you, and acting accordingly. The truth is, there's no strong, credible evidence that immigration in the UK increases overall crime rates. And in some cases, actually, the data points in the opposite direction. So go back to the Migration Advisory Committee and the academics, such as the University of Oxford Centre on Migration, Policy and Society. They find no statistically significant correlation between areas with large migrant populations and higher crime rates. And in fact, some high immigration areas, some London boroughs and certain university towns, have lower than average crime rates once you adjust for deprivation and demographics. And similar studies in the EU and the US. They find the same broad result. Once you control for demographic and socioeconomic factors, immigration has little to no effect on overall crime rates. So there you have it. The stats and the studies say immigration and crime is not the horror story you might think from scrolling through angry Twitter threads and the tabloids. But you know what? If you want to believe that squirrels are secretly running the UK, I'm not going to stop you.
All right, well, that's all very well you saying that, Jim, with your stats. As you know, you can prove anything with stats. But I want to say this to you, Jim. What about the cost? What about these hotels? What do you say on that?
Okay, well, let's talk about the protests outside the hotel, shall we? Because we've all seen the headlines and you've heard the shouting. If you've been really unlucky, you've read the comments section. So let's dig into how gossip, algorithms, and viral outrage turbocharge the panic about immigration. Story usually goes government quietly moves asylum seekers into a hotel. Locals get no warning. Facebook explodes, and suddenly there's a bloke with a megaphone claiming civilization's over. So, what's actually happening in the hotels? As you mentioned earlier, the UK's been putting thousands of asylum seekers in hotels. Not because we've decided to give everyone a mini break, but because there's a shortage of proper accommodation and there's an asylum backlog so big it should have its own postcode.
Well, yeah, the infrastructure is just not in place, is it?
It's not. And this is a failure of successive governments over a number of
It's
years.
also it's not economically viable either because I was just looking at some of the costings from the NAO National Audit Office.
Mm.
So they're saying hotels versus shared housing. Hotels £145 per night versus £14.41 for shared house. But if we haven't got these shared houses available, which we haven't because we've got a really low stock of housing.
Is that because we sold all the social housing off
Yeah,
in the 80s?
well, absolutely. That's another
Thanks,
factor.
Mags.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as we've got a shortage of, council housing and housing for social reasons. So there's a cost there straight away. But if we haven't got the infrastructure, then we're kind of having to do what we need to do. I saw today in the paper from the Tory government saying, let's put them all in camps.
Oh,
So again, it's about that whole dehumanizing, isn't it? That
absolutely.
genuine asylum seekers. And this is from the leader of the opposition. So it's a real hot potato, this story, isn't it? And
It
and,
certainly
and
is.
politicians
Well, again, I'd
certainly
like
are.
to I'd like
So,
to come back to the role of politicians in a little while.
we'll come back to that, but it's certainly not helpful, is it,
It's
to,
extremely
to
unhelpful.
talk in these dehumanizing terms?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we are going back to some very, very dark times in human histories when we do that.
So that there is a cost, and people are right to be upset about the cost.
Yeah.
But that again is a different issue. That is a result of this country, like you say, for the last 30, 40 years, not investing in the infrastructure that's needed to deal with, which is not a localized issue. This is worldwide, isn't it?
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
People are on the move, aren't they?
Yeah, people have always migrated. So if we go back to these hotels, I mean, they're often picked at very short notice. And one of the problems is there's no community consultation. You get about as much consultation as you get before Netflix cancels your favourite show. And that lack of transparency is going to annoy people. And into that annoyance stroll the far right who slap a scary headline on Facebook using photos that turn out to be from a different country, and suddenly there's a protest. I want to bring some police data if I can, because there is no significant pattern of crime spikes caused by people in these hotels. Incidents happen because, and I hope you're sitting down because this might shock you, they happen everywhere. But it's a tiny fraction of residents, roughly the same as the general population. The Home Office, Full Fact, and BBC Verify have all looked into these viral horror stories, and they find a lot of them are about as real as a Love Island relationship after filming wraps. We're talking misattributed images, arrests from unrelated events, even stories from other countries being presented as local truth. Take this week. A social media firestorm claimed migrants from Epping's protest hit Bell Hotel were being moved to a luxury Canary Wharf hotel. The result? Angry locals gathered at an empty hotel. That's right, folks. The only thing housed there was petrol for the outrage. But hey, clicks were clicked. Or take Southport's tragic stabbing last year. A frenzy of misinformation wrongly branded the attacker as a migrant, triggering a wave of riots long before the truth emerged. They were merely British, the police clarified. But the social media tidal wave had already struck. Because here's the thing, tensions flare without any actual crime wave. You drop 100 people into a small town overnight, and you're going to create an immediate strain on services. GP waiting list grows, the school runs get tighter. And if the locals feel ignored, they're more likely to believe the rumour that someone nicked Mrs. Jones's hanging basket. The extremist groups then actively use these sites to whip up fear.
So regarding that guy, the Southport attacker,
Yeah.
he was born in Cardiff.
Yes.
So
He was British.
Absolutely, and I was listening to a podcast the other day, and I think that was BBC Fact Check. They said there was like 22 million posts on social media saying this guy was an illegal immigrant.
Yeah.
So
they were lies, basically.
Absolutely,
lies.
But that there are organisations, as we're now about to find out, there are organisations in their interest to push out this disinformation to further their own agenda, isn't it?
Absolutely. So yeah, the amplification loop works like this. Someone whispers, "Oh, I heard there was trouble." It becomes a Facebook rant in a Truth UK type group. Someone turns it into an X post, loudening in and complaining about millennials. A TikTok video appears, complete with dramatic zoom-ins and suspenseful music, and here's where it gets especially cynical. Anti-migrant YouTubers are earning serious cash, like a couple of £1,000s a month, just by live streaming protests and inflaming tensions. They broadcast confrontations, fuel anger, and they rake in the views. Meanwhile, your asylum seekers are left stuck in limbo. And suddenly the media, they bike it out across the country as viral outrage. Because tabloids, they love these stories. Particularly if there's a photo of a police van and a bloke looking cross. Whether the details are confirmed, I mean, come on, details are for nerds, Stu.
Well, absolutely. And, let's look at the government who were with us for over 14 years. The architects of austerity and, what happened after that de-investment in society. So homelessness, child poverty, elderly living in squalor, NHS at breaking point, cost of living crisis, transport is a mess, pollution in the rivers, well-paid jobs are on the decrease.
So people are angry.
Let's use this.
But let's blame someone
Let's use this and blame someone else. And what better headline and what story provokes people to take their mind off what the real issues are better than illegal immigrants? And this is kind of what we're seeing being whipped up around all the social media. And to be fair, some of these like think tanks also who have other agendas as well, such as like in America, around these replacement theories and so on and so forth. And you can even get scarier than that, like eugenics and so on and so forth.
Yeah, well, then we get into a very dark place. And that's the whole point, really. All these digital fires, they're not harmless. When falsehoods about asylum seekers go viral, they spark real protests, like a wave of anti-migrant rallies over the summer. Many of these were stoked by far-right groups who were using Telegram and Facebook to coordinate. They were targeting hotels, housing asylum seekers. Textbook case of virtual venom going viral. Even a local police chief admitted there was political pressure to backtrack after wrongly linking immigration to unrest. That's a scary glimpse of how bad information can warp public policy. Social medias, they're like a toddler, hopped up on sugar, always wanting more reaction. Fear, outrage, panic, perfect currency for engagement. The more you freak out, the more it spreads. And once the lie's out there, and the truth takes a nap in a dark corner, it's ignored, it's very sleepy. If you spot a wild claim about immigration on your timelines, just ask yourself, what's the source? What's the evidence? Is the hotel even populated? And why is this person getting paid for fear? So if I can give a balanced view, protests are often fueled by frustration at government policy, and then they're turbocharged by misinformation.
Absolutely.
The data doesn't show a crime wave. The big problems are bad planning, sudden accommodation changes, and slow decisions. And they all keep locals and asylum seekers stuck in limbo. And social media doesn't reflect panic, it amplifies it. Misinformation about immigration spreads fast and it triggers real fear, protests, even violence. Often it's fueled by bad actors chasing views or ideology. But if you check the facts, official sources, context, evidence, you'll usually find the only thing exploding online was someone's outrage. There's one other big thing for us to talk about here, and that's UK foreign policy. This is the bit where we stop blaming your neighbour's cousin and we start blaming things that actually matter. So here's a big question. Does UK foreign policy make immigration worse? I'll do the short answer first. Yes, sometimes. The longer answer, right, stick the kettle on, this gets complicated and a little bit depressing.
Okay, is there any biscuits? Or have they all gone?
So there's a couple of rich teas, mate, but...
Okay, all right. I'll stick the kettle on, you carry on.
Okay, good man. Hands up if you like tidy moral narratives. Yeah, me too. Showing reality isn't that helpful. In some cases, let's take Yemen for example, NGOs and courts have said that UK arms exports and support contribute to a chain of events that make displacement worse. That's not hypothetical hand-waving. Amnesty, CAAT and others have documented links and the courts have even been involved. So this isn't just activists shouting in a park with a megaphone shaped like a pineapple. It's real and it's serious. There's a causal conveyor belt, so you can see where the blame chain might start. You sell or supply weapons and training, so conflicts can burn longer and harder. If you have longer and worse conflicts and infrastructure collapses, hotels shut, crops fail. When you have collapsed services, it leads to violence. People get packed into cars, lorries, whatever they can find. Neighbours take them first. Some eventually try and go further afield. So yes, if your government contributes to conflict intensity, that can add to displacement. It's not magic, it's logistics, it's death, it's despair. It's
And it's worth adding here as well. Britain's a big exporter of military weapons.
They certainly are. I mean,
it's good business. It's good for business.
It's a massive business in the UK. So if we look at Yemen, because this is a great example of it, and mention people like Amnesty and CAAT, they've repeatedly flagged that UK arms licenses to Saudi-led coalitions as part of a system that's worsened civilian suffering. Courts, as I have even stepped in. The result of that, we have a humanitarian catastrophe with millions displaced or dependent on aid. Do UK weapons alone explain all the displacement? No. But they are credibly part of the chain that made things far worse. That's the important moral and empirical point. There are some big caveats. There are multiple drivers. Conflict, persecution, climate shocks, economic collapse, corruption. They all push people to flee. Arms sales are an ingredient. They're not the whole stew.
And, I'll stick in another ingredient, if you will. I'll
Please.
sprinkle a little bit of pepper on top.
Oh, lovely.
Oh, yeah. So 2023, the UK spent 4.3 billion from its aid budget as well. So cut aid as well. So that's not going to help the overall dish of the day, is it?
It really isn't. Now, most people who get displaced stay nearby. UNHCR data show most people run to neighbouring states, only a small slice end up in Europe or the UK. So trying to link a single licence to a person arriving in Croydon, that's usually a stretch. Attribution's messy. Providing a specific export, proving a specific export causes a specific journey to the UK. That's methodology.
Sure.
I mean, you can't do it. But it's not a case, therefore, we sold a gun, someone bought a plane ticket. It's a long, horrible shared chain. But There is most definitely a contribution, and it's not just Yemen. That's a really good example. Syria, Libya, other conflicts shown so similar overlaps between arms flows, foreign intervention, and displacement. Watchdog groups like AOAV, CIPRI, and CAAT, they've all flagged how arms transfers from Western states correlate with spikes in conflict intensity and civilian harm. And again, they're not the only cause, they're a contributor. But what does this do? It means that people have to flee. They have to go somewhere. If you don't want people migrating to your country, don't set up a chain of events where they can't live in their own anymore. Well, let's not just narrow it down to metal and rockets. Foreign policy shapes migration via military interventions and regime change, because that destabilizes and causes long-term displacement. We show diplomatic support for repressive regimes. I mean, if you prop up a bad actor, then people suffer. We have climate and development policy. That failure to address climate risk equals more future displacement. And our own asylum and visa rules. How many legal routes exist influences who makes dangerous journeys. So, what the UK does abroad and at home together influences the picture. It's all part of that same ecosystem. Like a very grim national park where someone's been dropping lit cigarettes. How confident are we then? We're confident enough, I think, to say that UK policy can make displacement worse, and in some clear cases like Yemen, there's strong evidence.
I think that the main thing around this, and we are seeing this from the government, is slow steps, but you're not going to solve this on your own as one little island.
No.
You have to collaborate. You have to collaborate. And we've started, we're speaking to France, got the one in, one out policy. Okay, it's a start. But that's certainly more sensible than the Rwanda project, for instance.
Yes.
So they say about smash the gangs. Well, that's not going to happen overnight, is it? But that is the right approach, and I think the right language, rather than demonising asylum seekers, who are people who are genuinely in need of refuge.
Absolutely.
So I'm hearing a better narrative around it, and we're actually humanising some of these, people who are trying to get to the country for safety. And let's not forget, people have been dying trying to get here as well. This is not a decision you would take lightly, is it? To put your whole family
into a small boat and cross a huge path. Well, no, absolutely not.
So clearly people are desperate, aren't they?
Oh yeah.
It's all about survival, and if you had a family, then I'm sure you would do the same. Absolutely. In order to get people safe. So I think the language is important as well, isn't it? About how we talk about people and make sure we don't other refugees, and some of this, the demos at the hotels and so on. I don't know if you saw some of the clips on the news, but when some of the demonstrators are interviewed and asked why they're doing it, they sometimes come across as though they don't really know why. But actually, the example you've just given there is a detailed explanation, and maybe people don't want that. That's too hard.
Maybe so.
That's too hard.
Okay, well, what I'll do, I'll put it into a scandalously neat slogan. Don't sell fire to your neighbours and then be surprised when they ask to move in. Well, let's move on and talk about this thing of who's saying what and why. So you've heard the stories. Bands of invaders, gastrointestinal sabotage of the NHS, and the occasional caravan of people stealing all the post boxes. But who's actually doing all this spreading? Well, spoiler, it's not librarians.
Well, it's not me.
Okay, so it's not librarians and it's not you. It must be down to three messy overlapping gangs. Tabloids, politicians, and online disinfo networks. So they've all got their own business models, which is basically panic sells. Let's start with the tabloids and partisan outlets, the original clickbait factories. These are the ones with the rotating front page fonts that scream at you. They love tidy narratives. Invasion, flood, wave, repeat. Typical moves include using gross arrivals, not net figures, conflating legal student work visas with small boat crossings, and slapping on sensational headlines that would make a disaster film blush. It's not new. Analysis going back years show UK press coverage of migration focuses on alarmist language and numbers that shape public perceptions. They treat statistics like a tapas menu. You take the tastiest sounding number, serve it with some extra panic, and ignore the bits nobody wants to eat. As for the politicians and the political operatives, they love facts when it's convenient. Lots of politicians use migration as a political accelerant. It's potent, it's easy to frame, and voters care. Their tactics just cherry pick a peak quarter, confuse charges and convictions, or demand nationality data in ways that stoke fear rather than clarity. The Robert Jenrick 40% claim is a classic example. Loudly cited, but based on charges, not convictions, and on a nationality field that the police themselves consider unreliable. Fact checkers and commentators tore it apart. Politicians treat statistics like campaign slogan. They're brief, loud, and best served without context.
I think, with politicians, it suits politicians, some politicians, to create these culture wars, doesn't it? Because, if you can start a culture war that creates diversion, then, as we said earlier, then you can easily navigate past the real issues, which we've said earlier, which is a country in slight decline, underinvestment in infrastructure, poverty, cost of living crisis, NHS, etc., etc. So there's a lot of things in this country that are making it difficult for people. And if people are angry, what better way to get that anger out than focused on another group of people who the government, amplified by the media, have told you that's their fault. And it's a dangerous road, isn't it? It's a dangerous game, the culture wars.
Oh, hugely. And we've talked about tabloids and we've talked about politicians. Let's not forget the organised online networks as well. So you've got your far right groups, your agitators, your monetized content creators. They'll copy a photo from another country, mislabel it, add ominous music, and boom, instant moral panic. So groups like Patriotic Alternative and Britain First, plus a swarm of anonymous accounts, they specialise in this. NGOs and analysts have traced how fake or misattributed content has amplified real world protests and even riots. They spread it because outrage pays, literally. Live stream a post, get views, get ads, get cash. The market for fury is booming. And sadly, due to algorithms and the emotional economy, lies spread faster than truth. Social media platforms optimize for engagement. And anger and fear score very highly in the algorithm leaderboard. They spread further and faster than calm, boring facts. Algorithms love drama. They hate nuance because nuance
Absolutely
doesn't have clicks.
No, for sure.
So when you put it all together, you get high political salience.
Yeah.
Migration gets votes, politicians chase it. Complex data. Migration is hard to explain quickly, so it's easy to cherry pick. You get cognitive bias. We share stuff that confirms what we already believe. And then you get media economics. Fear and outrage equal engagement, equal revenue. And that's why a handful of bad numbers can feel like a national crisis within 24 hours. So come back to our recipe, Stu. 1 part political opportunism, 2 parts tabloid sauce and a huge dollop of social media seasoning, and you have a national panic stew, and it is deliciously toxic.
So, we've been knocking the right tonight a little bit.
We have.
So for a bit of balance. So I've been reading a book by Ash Sakar on immigration, and her thoughts are the left as well over the years, their defeats stem from making sameness the condition of solidarity. Whereas, groups who feel that they have injustice, such as, groups who suffer racism, sexism, rather than having that individual fight, it's all about, such as the far right have managed to do well, they've aligned together, and as a result, they're more powerful. So I think much maligned groups need to group together and fight the social injustices, which are the real problem. And as we said, the homelessness, the elderly, the NHS, racism, sexism, just by tackling these one by one isn't enough. Society needs to collaborate and say, actually, this is all an injustice. We don't like living like this anymore. And that can be done, but that is the way to fight the right. And they've done it very well. They've connected, they've got messages out there, and they've got messages that people believe and feel passionate about. Whereas I think on the left, it's too fragmented. There's too many causes. And of course there is. There's a lot of people who are struggling in society. So a lot of this has come from the left not really getting their message across in a strong way. Our alienation is manufactured. Neoliberalism deliberately atomised this. As Thatcher said, economics are the method. The object is to change the heart and the soul. People need to group together and learn and listen to the facts and look at this problem for what it is, which is complex, isn't it? As we found out tonight.
After all of that, then, after the headlines and the hotel protests and the dodgy stats, let's answer the big one. Is immigration actually a problem? Or is everything fine, probably? The answer to this is really, look, it is complicated. It's like assembling IKEA furniture without the instructions. There are some measurable downsides in certain situations. So wages, for example. In some low-paid sectors, sudden big inflows can nudge wages down a bit for UK-born workers doing the same jobs. And the Migration Advisory Committee says the effect is usually small and localised, but it is real. And housing, if 500 people arrive in an area where the local council already struggles to house 50, well, yeah, rents and waiting lists go up. But the biggest villain here actually is decades of underbuilding. It's not a sudden influx of Lithuanian bricklayers. And then there's public services. Sharp, unplanned increases in population can stress GPs, schools, and maternity wards. And usually it's temporary, but if funding lags behind, then tensions are going to brew. But it's not that migration breaks the NHS, it's more like the NHS is already broken and migration occasionally drops another patient into the waiting room.
So, that said, do you know what percentage of asylum seekers are as a percentage of the UK population of 67 million?
I'm going to go for 5%.
Yeah, well, isn't that interesting in itself? 0.4%.
My goodness.
0.4%. So asylum seekers causing all this crime, taking all our jobs, taking all our beds in the NHS. It's 0.4%. So is all this blame disproportionate?
Well, let's talk about some of the things that people think are a problem, but actually aren't really, or at least not much. Taxpayer burden. Overall, migrants tend to pay more in than they take out, especially skilled workers and recent EEA arrivals.
Well, that's a good thing, isn't it?
Yeah,
So
the awkward truth,
Big
on
tick.
average.
Big
Yeah,
tick.
that's it. People think
Yeah.
it's a taxpayer burden. It's not. UK-born adults actually cost more thanks to pensions and healthcare.
Right.
When it comes to NHS waiting times, nationally, migrants are younger and healthier, so they use the NHS less. In fact, a lot of NHS staff are migrants. The main drivers of wait times are staffing shortages, funding, and the pandemic backlog that we're still working through. So if you kicked out all migrants tomorrow, your GP might have time for you because they'd be unemployed too. So we've got the things that maybe aren't so good. We've got the things that people think about but aren't. Now I'd like to talk about the it depends ones.
It depends.
So social cohesion. If you have rapid change and no integration plan, then you've got a recipe for friction, right? But done with community support and involvement, it can work just fine. The Casey Review and others show it's the management that matters, not the numbers.
So you don't think a policy of just shoving everyone up north in a deprived housing area is the answer?
I'm not sure it's going to help. Sorry. The economy-wide impact. Immigration brings growth, but it also puts some infrastructure demands in place. So whether it feels like a benefit depends on whether roads, housing, services keep up. In the UK, they often don't.
So how come when we go to live abroad, say in Spain or wherever, we're not immigrants, we're expats?
I don't want to get into that. The bottom line appears to be immigration is not the apocalyptic crisis that some would have you believe, but nor is it a magic one for the economy. The evidence says the downsides are mostly localised, short-term and fixable with good planning, where the upsides include labour supply, economic dynamism, and a net positive fiscal impact in many cases. So the real problem is bad management, bad infrastructure planning, and bad faith politics. So is immigration a problem? Sometimes, in some places, for some people, yes. Is it the problem? No. And most of the time, it's not the migrants who are the issue. It's the people with the megaphone, the bad spreadsheet skills. It's the headline that screams, invasion. Well, that's about it from this week's episode of Everything's Fine, probably your regular dose of facts, feelings, and the occasional rant. If you enjoyed the episode, or even if you just enjoyed shouting it through your headphones, do the usual podcast things, please. Subscribe, leave a review, tell your mates. We're also on social media, because apparently you have to be, otherwise you don't exist. Search for us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, or TikTok. And you'll find us posting clips and facts and occasional pictures of me looking confused at graphs.
Jim, why did you say TikTok like that?
Because sometimes I like to mispronounce things for the sheer fun of it. Like Kit Kats, for example. Which really irritates people.
Yeah,
but it's not wrong, is it?
So, for sure, look at our post on TikTok.
On TikTok. And remember, every like, every share, and subscribe helps to fight misinformation. It also feeds the algorithm. That's basically our new robot overlord, isn't it? If you don't like, share, or subscribe, the algorithm will assume you've moved to a cave and it'll send you nothing but Bear Grylls reruns. And nobody wants that.
Don't.
So click the buttons, stroke the algorithm, and we'll see you next time and try to convince you that whatever you might have heard to the contrary, everything's fine. Probably.